Senate in West Virginia, Jason Barrett. Welcome back, JB.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I hear somebody's phone. Bill, is that you?
Don't believe so.
It's the only one on.
It's gone now, whatever it was.
Might have been me.
I think it was. Oh, there's no mic. Yeah. Welcome back, Jason. And we're going to have you for a full hour today, too.
Yeah.
And then you're off to do something pretty cool.
Yeah. So the other evening, Governor Morrissey texted me and asked me if I wanted to go to D.C. to the HHS office today for an announcement with Secretary Kennedy. And, of course, I took him up on his offer, and it appears that from all the reports and what the governor's indicated to me is that the secretary is going to announce essentially that a bunch of these food dyes that we have banned in West Virginia starting in 2028, that the federal government and the FDA are going to ban some of these food dyes. And I don't know if it's the same list as West Virginia or if it's fewer than that or more than that. So that's about all I know at the moment, other than where I need to be and when I need to be there.
When you put together your list, what was your reference point for which dyes you wanted to ban and which ones you were going to keep, or did you just ban all of them?
Well, so it's several of the different colors and then a couple of other additives. And so really that bill came from Delegate Worrell and Delegate Burkhammer. They're the ones that is actually Delegate Burkhammer was the lead sponsor of the bill that came out of the House. And my bill was to do the same thing, but in the school system. And so I got this idea as their bill was moving forward and the Senate bill was moving forward was to amend one into the other on both sides. And that just sped the process up. And it was really, I did it that way because I knew what the lobbying effort was going to be against it from Big Food and Big Drink. And so before they could rally the troops and start to hire more lobbyists, which is ultimately what they did, we were able to get the thing so far down the line and get really close to completed legislation before they really knew what hit them. And so that was really the strategy behind it. But there's just been a lot of research, and it was basically about the several different colors and then the two other additives that we put in that.
Is this phase one of additional legislation that will come, Jason, or was this the entire package?
Well, I think it depends on what we see out of Secretary Kennedy today as to what the federal government is going to ban and when they're going to do it.
So when the federal government decides that they're going to ban, you don't have to do a sister law in the state. That just becomes the law, and everyone has to abide by it.
Right. And so I would fully expect, Secretary Kennedy came to St. Joe's School when, the announcement was made and kind of a celebration of the food dyes bill and some of the other, the waiver that the governor asked for as it relates to SNAP paying for sodas. And so, he was there and very supportive of the bill. So my guess is, and that's all it is a guess, is that he's going to, ban as much or more than we did. Now, I'm curious to see as to when the time frame is, because the big food and big drink companies, told us that we originally had our bill for January of 2027, which aligned with when Red 3 would be banned nationally. And the large company said, no, we can't accommodate that. We need more time. And they want to push it out 5 years. And we gave them another year to 2028. Not really what I wanted to do, but we did that in order to ensure the bill would pass and the governor would sign it. So I'm interested to see what time frame Secretary Kennedy puts on those companies now.
What other, there was a yellow dye in there too, correct?
Yellow number 5.
Yellow number 5.
Yeah, and there's red 40, red 3. There's a couple blues with numbers. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. And yellow number 5 is a big one, and certainly red 40.
We had Gretchen Fry and Chanda Williams-Doles in from the Martinsburg Public Library this morning. Part of that reason was what is now $1 million grant that was secured for the public library, as they've got some asbestos and HVAC issues that they've got to take care of, and it was a $3.5 million total tab, and they needed about another $1.5 million, which wound up being $1 million. You have a story that goes along with that, Mr. Barrett.
Well, a brief story. Gretchen has reached out to me a couple of times. She's been to Charleston numerous times to advocate on behalf of the Martinsburg County Public Library. Senator Rucker and I each have given some donations from our LEDA money.
Explain what that is.
Local Economic Development Assistance, which every legislator gets a portion of to use in their community for specific projects like this. And so it's been on my radar, and I put together the Senate budget this year and started to, and as the House Finance Chairman did as well. And when we started our negotiations between Chairman Chris and I, we were going down through some of those line items, and it kind of sparked in my mind about that. And we were, I thought we had a very conservative budget where we actually spent $38 million less than the governor's proposed budget. And so I made the decision at that point to put money in there for the Martinsburg-Berkeley County Public Library. And I texted Gretchen and just said, hey, I need to know, what dollar amount do you need? What do you need to get it done? She said $1.5 million. So that's what I put in the budget.
The governor vetoed line item vetoed $500,000 out of that. I didn't know that this was a new one for me, because I knew you could line item veto if the governor has the power to do that, which he does in West Virginia. But I didn't know you could amend the amount. I thought you had to line item veto all of it, or you couldn't touch any of it.
No, the Constitution outlines that the governor has the ability to reduce line items dollar amounts. So whether that would be a supplemental appropriation, we go in and pass a bill to spend $10 million in human services. If we passed a bill to do that, the governor could come in and reduce it. Now, he can never increase line items. He can only reduce, and that means reduce them to zero if he chose, which he did, I think, for some of the line item vetoes in the budget bill. But he also has the ability to reduce.
Did you have an indication that would be reduced to $1 million?
He called me the night before he did it, and we had a conversation about some of the things he was going to do. Are you permitted to tell us why he decided to line item veto $500,000 out of that? I can't say specifically why he chose $500,000 out of the Martinsburg-Berkeley County Library, but he has indicated, and I think this, he's kind of said this publicly, and we know these things, that certainly the Hope Scholarship is going to cost a lot of money next year. I think next year's $190. With the stock market being down, one of the concerns that we have is that our pension plans have to earn 7.5% in order for us to not have to come in and add additional money to those pension plans. There are PEIA concerns. So there are a number of things kind of out there that are big ticket items for next year, and I think that what he's making the case that we need to be able to save some of that money and be able to look ahead. Now, why $500,000 was taken from the library to do that, that's a question for the governor. That's not something I can answer. But, and again, we did spend in our budget, the compromise budget between the House and the Senate, there was $38 million that would have been left unappropriated. We left $5 million of it unappropriated, meaning not being spent, not being put anywhere. And then we took $33 million of that 38 and put it in the personal income tax reduction fund. Now, certainly, if we were in a situation where we wanted to move it out of there, it just takes a supplemental appropriation. It's much easier to do that than sticking it in the rainy day fund. But it also, sends a message to the people of West Virginia that we're, still trying to move the ball down the field as it relates to reducing personal income tax.
Bill?
Yeah, Jason, I want to come back to your meeting with Secretary Kennedy in a couple of minutes. But the discussion, the phone call you had with Governor Marcy a couple of days ago over the weekend, did that include the possibility of a cut in Medicaid, or has that been discussed at all, even in casual discussion now?
No, and there were no cuts to Medicaid. We fully funded Medicaid.
No, I was thinking about what might be coming down
from the federal government.
From the Fed,
I understand now.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I think that phone call was on Friday or Thursday. I don't remember. It could have been one of the drivers that he mentioned. There were several things that he mentioned as to big ticket items. So that I know Speaker Hanshaw talked about that the other day, and it's something that we're mindful of, and we'll have to when we had that huge expansion of Medicaid back during the Tomlin administration, that's a lot of money in our state budget every year for not only Department of Human Services, but specifically to Medicaid.
But still falls in the arena of speculation. You don't know. It is.
Yeah.
Okay, going back to the meeting with Secretary Kennedy a few minutes ago, later today, you made a comment a few minutes ago that he possibly might ban certain of these food colorants. How would that differ from the EPA regulations that Governor Marcy, or Attorney General Marcy, took on a few years ago, challenging the EPA's authority to regulate? How would the two differ?
Well, I'm not an expert in federal departments, but I can tell you that the FDA regulates a lot of things as it relates to food. And so I think what you would see is that the FDA would come in and change their policy, as I hope, change their policy as how they approve certain things and that are used in our food supply. I think that the FDA would just ban these certain additives. And so I understand the point that you're trying to make. I don't know enough about some of the EPA rules that the federal government has and how that inflicts on states' rights. And I think that's the argument that then Attorney General Morrissey has fought the government and won. I don't know that there's a lot of similarity between those two things. Your point may be valid. I just don't know enough about it to tell you that there's a correlation between those two.
Nor do I. I'm not trying to put you in a corner. I just find it to be interesting to see the separation between the two, because to me on the surface they're very similar. So,
Matt Miller.
When it comes to those dyes and food colorings, I just saw a little bit of an interview last night on an Instagram clip of how so many things are allowed in this country that aren't allowed even in other countries. So for some of these companies that say, hey, we can't do anything until 2028, well, it seems like you're already doing it.
That's exactly right. And I've made the point several times that if you go buy a Mountain Dew in the UK, it's colored with beta carotene, and in the United States it's colored with yellow number 5. So it was just a stall tactic. It's just a way to delay and look, they don't want to do it. They want to use those bright, brilliant colors and that appeal to kids, and that's usually what a lot of the dyes are in. It's in a lot of breakfast food, prepackaged breakfast food, and a lot of other things that really stand out, in candies that really stand out to kids. And so, but you're absolutely right. They're doing it in all these other countries, and it's not a problem. It won't be a problem here either.
You talked about I'm sorry. Go
okay, no, I was going to say along that line, and I'm not that familiar with them, Jason. Is there a recognizable medical risk with these dyes?
Well, there's been a tremendous amount of research done on the effects, specifically in children, and aggressiveness, inattentiveness, a lot of the symptoms that are associated with ADHD. A lot of times that these kids that consume a lot of these food dyes show. And so that's the real reason. Some of those, for example, red number 3, which the federal government, the FDA is banning January 15th of 2027, I think is the date. And that's what California did, and that's what we added that as well to do in schools starting in 2025. But it's, there's research out there, and it was used in cosmetics, and it was taken out of cosmetics because it was cancer causing. But here we are in 2025 still allowing it in our food supply.
Back to you, Matt.
Yeah, I was wondering, you talked about obviously the food manufacturers and their lobby coming against you. Was there ever any pushback as far as you said, hey, we want this out of our school system, and schools going, where do we get stuff that doesn't have that in it?
Well, before I introduced the bill and before the bill got traction in the Senate as it relates to schools, I had a conversation with Superintendent Blatt, and she indicated that they wouldn't have a problem, that it wouldn't affect their contract, because I was concerned that the argument would come out that it's going to affect our contract. Now we're going to have to buy their foods. It's going to cost the state a bunch of money. And she indicated to me very early that was not the case. I mean, it's the difference of getting Cheerios instead of Fruit Loops. That's the difference. Okay. To put in a very practical way to accommodate not using dyes.
Fruit Loops is very colorful.
It is.
And there are companies that make, it's not Fruit Loop because that's
right.
a brand name, but
yes.
but a very similar looking cereal to a Fruit Loop that doesn't have dyes in it, and it's still colorful.
This is April 22. Have you gotten an indication of what the April revenue numbers look like to this point of the month?
I do. So through close of business yesterday, we are 98%. We've met our estimates by 98%. And so the estimate for the month of April was just over almost 508 million. We've collected almost 499 million. So that represents 98% of what our estimate was. The couple of the drivers of that are the personal income tax and the corporate net tax. I would estimate that we would be above estimates. We would have a surplus of April of probably the $70 million range based on where we're at. The insurance tax doesn't come in until the end of the month, which what I would expect to be about a $35 million boost to those numbers by the end of the month. So I think we're going to be somewhere in the $70 million ahead of estimates.
And
for
you
April.
come into April with a $100 million surplus built in.
Right.
So you could finish the year, because May will be your last month of the year, correct?
June
1 starts July 1 starts. So you still have May and June. You could be over $200 million
I think we
surplus.
will be at this point, because these are typically April, May, and June are typically good collection months.
Now, Householder is the explainer of the trigger. He was one of the big creators of that.
Yeah.
So with, let's say 200, we'll take the round number, plus the 33 million that is parked there right now. Do you anticipate there being a trigger ultimately this year, or not this year?
Not this year. I don't think so. I think as we get into the next couple of years, I think we'll probably have a trigger, and we'll see what some of this other development that happens based on House Bill 2014, and we'll see what that does for our collections as these data centers come on board, to see if we're able to do greater reductions in personal income tax. But I wouldn't expect one this time.
When that bill passed and those triggers were put in, what was the discussion on how long it might take for those triggers to actually work and there would be no income tax in West Virginia? You obviously had to look at it and go, that's not happening in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
It's going to take time.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with collections. There are a lot of factors, and Eric can probably explain it better than I can, because he and the two Erics are the ones that came up with this plan of triggers.
TAR and Householder.
That's right. Triggers aren't my thing, but that's their baby. So I don't know, to be honest with you, Matt. I don't remember when we really anticipated that to come down significantly, but we have made cuts of, I think, 27.25% to personal income tax. So
I thought that was as much as 30%.
I thought it was as well. I thought it was over 30%.
no, we cut it originally, and the original bill was 21.25%. There was then a 4% cut and a 2% cut, so it's 27.25%.
Gotcha.
You always round up.
Don't question the finance check.
I should not, but I was like you. I thought it was about 32%.
Yeah, I thought we had gone to 30, so we are corrected on that one. Very good. And let's talk about some other legislation from a financial standpoint in terms of what passed that will affect West Virginia. Let's take the data center bills out, because that money's not flowing yet.
Sure.
Right? Maybe a year or so away from money actually flowing on the data center taxes that'll come into the state. What other legislation did you pass this year that you anticipate will generate additional revenue?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are going to save revenue. Is basically there was one that deals with when judges require certain services to be paid, and certain court mandated services that have to be done, for whether it be children or adults, to not pay for those services above the Medicaid rate, which is going to save the state somewhere to $7 to $9 million. So that factors
In a year?
Yeah, every year.
Wow.
And so that's because some of these these services would be ordered by the court, and some of these facilities that were offering the services were charging a lot to the state, and so we had a bill to keep them at the Medicaid rate for reimbursement, and so that's $7 to $9 million every year. I think that's important, and that was how we got to. Part of that is that $7 to $9 million is part of the equation as to how we spent less money than what the governor's introduced budget did. So that's a big one, I think, to save money for the state.
How did West Virginia Birth to 3 ultimately work out?
Well, there's an increase in their line item in the budget. They are going to get a raise. The raise varies. It's not a flat rate across the board. I think it's up to 30%, but the department is going to do that. We had them in committee, and they outlined that they absolutely have a plan. They've asked for more money. We've given it to them in the budget to make sure that those raises do happen. We passed a bill out of the Senate to require 25% increase to those different therapists, but that's really not the way that it's done. It's typically done through a budget appropriation for reimbursement of those type of contractual services. We were really attempting to send the message that it was important from the Senate. I think the message was heard in the House, and I think there was a lot of supporters over there, which is why when we did the Senate budget, we included all of those increases. The House, their budget was actually worked off of the fiscal year 25 budget. They did not work off the governor's introduced budget. So when we went to the compromise, where Chairman Chris and I meet for hours at a time to hammer out the the compromise position of the two houses as it relates to their budget, that we ultimately got the Senate's position on the birth to three appropriation.
Is there anything that holds them responsible for actually taking that money and using it for increased reimbursement for those therapists?
If they want to be appropriately funded for their department next year.
Ultimately, that's how they'll answer to what they do with that money.
Yeah,
because the expectation is they'll use that.
Well,
additional money.
and they've said they came before the Senate Finance Committee and testified that's where they were going. That's what they were doing. So they're going to do it.
Now it's been, I think, 22 years. Nicole Sargent told us since their
22
last
or 23
increase.
Right.
So why this year finally? What broke the dam?
New finance chairman, I guess. I don't know. That's a joke. They've done, Nicole, and I've had several conversations with her and others across the state that they've made a good effort. They've made a great pitch to the legislators, and we've heard their concerns, and I think they're valid and they're legitimate. And there are a lot of families going unserved or underserved because of the lack of these different therapists that are able to provide these necessary services. So it was a priority of mine and a priority of the Senate, and we made sure it was in the budget.
As far as raises go, Jason, the circuit court, the family court, both received raises.
Well, let's not get into the magistrates yet because we only have a minute going into the break.
We'll hold off, okay?
Save that one for, I'm specifically saving that one for after the commercial break because
hopefully all the magistrates are in court right now.
That's going to take longer than a minute to explain that one, though, there. So we do have a minute left.
I have another
Jason,
very
go
quick
ahead.
one. Procedural. The DEI. There was some question the legitimacy of it, the way it was handled. Can you answer that in a minute's or time?
I'm glad this question's in a minute.
Yeah.
So there was what happened? The DEI bill passed the Senate fairly early. It went over to the House. They took them a while to get it out, and they ran the bill out on day 60. Excuse me. And the Democrats in the minority have one job on day 60, and that's to run the clock out. And stop bills that they think are bad policy. And so that's what they did. They offered 20-some amendments in the House. They were just trying to run the clock out and kill as many bills as they can, include that one. And so the bill comes over to the Senate, and Senator Garcia, who was in the House for a number of years, he wanted to offer amendments on concurring with the Senate or the House changes. I've never seen anyone be able to offer an amendment like that from the floor. And Senator Tarr made a motion to suspend Joint Rule 3. Now, in order to suspend a joint rule, you have to have 2/3 vote out of both houses. We didn't have that. We made a mistake on the floor. We kind of unrang the bell. We unwound everything. We went forward with the correct procedural motion, and I think at the end of the day, we did it correctly. But there was a little hiccup in the beginning.
To the second, so we are back with more in 4. Welcome back, the Admiral Bill Stubblefield. Billy.
Good morning again, Rob.
The Hall of Famer Matt Miller.
Good morning.
Senate Finance Chairman Jason Barrett.
Morning, guys.
I had to get used to not calling you Delegate Jason Barrett for a while. How many terms did you serve in the House?
4.
4.
That was my 8-year sentence in the House of Delegates.
And now how many years as a senator?
It's my 3rd year.
3 years. All right, very good. Okay, anyway, let's get into that topic Bill brought up before the break, and that is there was a raise for members of the judiciary, but not the magistrates. Why not?
Well, and let me before we ask Jason that the Speaker of the House was on last Monday. We asked him this question. He said it went through the House without any problem, went to the Senate, and it was cut out, and he did not really know the thinking on the Senate side.
Who cut it out, Jason?
Well, I'm going to tell you. Well, I mean, the bill came through. I'm not going to hide from it. It came through the Senate Finance Committee, and ultimately, it's the committee and the caucus's decision to make. The way in which these raises are funded. What we had looked at doing, what the House did was, and what I wanted to do was just the circuit court judges and the family law judges. But when you gave them a raise that was meaningful and worthwhile, it put those circuit court judges up even or more than the intermediate court and the Supreme Court. So we had to give them the raise too. Just because you can't have circuit court judges making more than the Supreme Court judges, just obvious. So what we ended up doing was $5,000 in the first year and $5,000 in the second year for the Supreme Court, the Intermediate Court, and the Circuit Court. And the way we're funding most of that is through a pension contribution holiday. The judicial pension.
Could I interrupt very quickly? You mentioned three. You did not mention family. Were they part of?
I'm sorry. The family law judge. Thanks, Bill. The family law judge, because they are way behind. They're going to get $10,000 in the first year and $5,000 in the second year. The way we're funding all of those four raises primarily is through a contribution holiday in the judicial pension,
which are overfunded, correct?
They're funded at 245%, which is the highest funded retirement system, public retirement system in the country. So this isn't coming out of general revenue, at least in the first year. And so that contribution holiday it takes effect in the fiscal year starting in July 1, 2026. The raise will take effect July 1 of 2027. So we will have all of that money that was saved in 26 and then again in 27, which will be enough to pay at least the first couple of years of the raise. And so the reason the magistrates aren't included is because there really wasn't an appetite to dip into general revenue to give pay raises to any elected officials. That's just kind of where the caucus was and where I think most of us were. The magistrates do not participate and are not members of the judicial pension plan. They are in PERS, the Public Employee Retirement System. So I didn't think it was fair or appropriate to take money out of a judicial pension retirement and use that to fund raises for individuals who are not in that pension plan. So that's the explanation.
So PERS would be if you were to do a general, let's say 5% raise for state employees, would the magistrates be included in that, or is that even separate from that?
No, because they're in all elected officials' salaries are set in code. So it does require a piece of legislation to do that, and I think the Speaker, Roger, indicated that next year the House would take the lead on doing a pay raise for magistrates. We'll see if we have the support to do it or not, but I think that there are a lot of public employees that deserve raises too, and we'll see if that's on the table as well.
And there were no raises for public employees this year, teachers, state employees, whatever.
Correct.
Okay. Now, in regards to the overfunding of the judicial pension plan, and we've talked about this before, I think with Eric Tarr last year when he was Senate Finance Chairman. Can you go into the reasons why that fund is permitted to be so overfunded by, I think you said 245%, and why you can't take money out of that fund to get it to a more reasonable overfunding percentage?
A little bit. We're mandated to put so much money in those retirement systems every year, and so that's why we had to pass a bill that created that contribution holiday, was to stop putting in there. But I don't know that there's any mechanism for us to pull money out of it.
Right.
I think is the issue, and West Virginia has really done a great job over the past several years to getting all of our pension plans at fully funded is considered to be 80%. That's considered to be fully funded. Our teachers' retirement system, which at one time was in the single digits, is now in the very high 70s, and will be fully funded at that 80%. But there have been a lot of things that have helped get that teachers' retirement system plan fully funded. There's about $320 or $30 million annually that goes into that fund to keep that to grow it to where it's fully funded. As far as things like on your property and casualty insurance on your home, they're part of that money, and that premium tax goes to funding the teachers' retirement system. So we're made a lot of progress getting them to fully funded, and they will be very soon. And all of the rest of ours, I believe, are at that 80% or higher.
Fully funded means if everybody retired today, we'd have enough money right now to pay the system.
Well, that would be 100%. So
fully funded.
Right. So at 80%, which is typically defined as 80% of being fully funded, is that if 80% of everyone that's in the plan retired today.
And that's not likely to happen.
No, it's highly unlikely. But for a plan like the judicial one to be at 245%, that's why I think it made a lot of sense to do. And that was the judge's idea. I'll give the circuit court judges, Stacey Nowicki Eldridge, who is a the judge in Lincoln County, and then also Judge Hammer from here in the Eastern Panhandle. They both testified before the Senate Finance Committee and talking about this contribution holiday. So I think that's why we made the decision. And I also cut about $5 or $5.5 million out of the Supreme Court's budget. Anyway, and so you'll remember in the past, the legislature just had to approve whatever the request was from the Supreme Court. Once we changed that through a constitutional amendment a few years ago, when the previous Supreme Court was out buying $32,000 couches, the people of West Virginia allowed the legislature to decrease the spending from the previous year by 15%. And so I think this is probably the first year that in the history of this, at least in the history of since the Constitution was changed in the early 30s, that the legislature has reduced the Supreme Court's budget request. And it's because they had 24 or $29 million in reappropriated money, which they have year after year, and they carry that money over. And so I met with them before the session, and they had 24, I think at that time, $24 million in reappropriated money from the previous year. They presented their budget. They talked about some of the one-time expenses that they were going to have, updating some new systems in the courthouses. And I asked them, I said, okay, if we pass this budget as is, what is your projection for your reappropriated money next year? And they said $29 million. Well, I hear that as a way that we can save $5 million of taxpayer money. And so that's what we did. And I don't think that they thought a lot of it, but one of the things that they said in that meeting, and I like all the Supreme Court justices, I get along with them fine, and a couple of them are former legislators.
One announced her retirement.
She did, and some of them are former legislators, so they get it. But one of the things that they said to me in this meeting was, well, we keep these reappropriated money because when we want to go do one-time spends that may cost several $1 million, we don't want to have to go to the legislature and ask for that. But that's really the way the process works. That's what you should be doing. We have the oversight, and we should be appropriating money. You have to come to us and say why you have the need, and we'll appropriate the money. Not we give you too much money every year until you build it up until you want to go buy something. That's not the way this process is supposed to work. So.
Jason, I realize, I'm sorry, Matt, you have to?
Well, my only question would be this, Bill, if I can just sneak it in. If you can create a bill that says we're going to do a holiday on putting money into that judicial pension, can't you create a bill to say we're going to take something out of that because it is overfunded?
Potentially. I don't know that we can't.
Okay.
So we very well may be able to do that. But it's I think this holiday is a better way to do it than just pull money out of it.
So it'll gradually begin to come down.
Yeah, I don't know that sends the right message to some of the credit agencies when they see the state going and rating pension plans. So I don't think it sends the right message. But I think that because this retirement system is funded at the highest rate in the entire country, I think this tax holiday and so the holiday will stop once the plan is funded at 150%.
Okay. Jason, I realize it's not on your watch, but going back to the magistrates again, they have the same judicial ethic code that the other judges do. What was the original reason of having the magistrates under PERS and the others under the judicial?
That's way beyond my time.
I realize
I can't answer that question. I don't.
Is it something that should be fixed?
I don't know that. I think the magistrates would certainly say that they should be in the judicial because the benefits are a little better, I think. I've never heard, no one's come to me and made that suggestion or that request. But I don't, there are different employees throughout the state that want to move from one plan to another. For example, we did it this year for some folks in Berkeley County primarily, and others too. The home confinement officers were in PERS, and we were able to move them to the EMS retirement. You'll remember that we did that for 911 workers a couple years ago, and we did it for the paid county paid firefighters to move them in the EMS retirement as well.
Because the duties were very similar to what the duties in EMS was, but you can make the same argument for the magistrates and the other judges.
Yeah, I think the magistrates could make that argument, and I would imagine that I don't know where the circuit court judges and some of the other judges what their position would be on it, but I think it's a conversation probably to be had.
Certainly.
Jason, let's talk about some other legislation that you were happy got passed this year. You get the next one. You can pick any one you want.
All right. Senate Bill 75 is a bill dealing with the horse industry, which is very important to Jefferson County. Several years ago, my first term in the legislature, I think it was 2014, what we call the haircut bill.
I remember that.
And so what the haircut bill did is it took several industries had to pay the workers' comp money back. And so there was a kind of a surcharge put on all these industries, coal and timber and the horse industry. They lost money out of their purse fund. And all those other industries have since been made whole. They no longer have to pay that charge. So this year, and to their credit, Senator Rucker and former Delegate Espinoza had attempted for several years to make that right that wrong, in my opinion. And the Senate just wouldn't run the bill over the past couple of years, and so we ran the bill out this year out of the Senate. It was Senator Rucker and I sponsored the bill, and we were able to get that. So it amounts to about $3.5 million out of excess lottery that will go back to where it originally was, and that is into the purse fund for tracks across the state, the 4 tracks across the state.
Very good. There is a commentary by Dave Wilson on Metro News today. I don't know if you saw it or not, but he says that the Republican majority has lost its focus. You didn't do enough this year for economic development. You didn't address the foster care issues in a serious enough manner. Your thoughts on that? I thought the data center bill was something that did address economic development, but there could have been more.
Well, I mean, and certainly Dave Wilson has every ability to file and run for office if he chooses.
Come on, Jason.
You know, there was...
Wouldn't be Jason if he didn't do that.
Well, I mean, you know, to say that we haven't done anything to foster care, I mean, you look at foster care and adoptive services in this year's budget compared to last year, and it's about a $100 million increase. For both of those programs. So I take offense when people that don't know what they're talking about say things like that, because you know, that is a huge priority of this legislature, has been for a number of years, and to put that kind of money, that is a huge shot in the arm for foster care and adoptive services. To put off the top of my head, it was $90 to $100 million to do that. And so, you know, I know there's a pushback on the data center bill. I had some pushback on it. I think we got the bill to a place where everybody is a winner in it now, and so I think when you start to see some of these data centers will start to pop up, they'll start to come in service. There will be a tremendous amount of revenue to counties and the state, which will be a huge economic boom to West Virginia.
Are there that many data centers? I mean, is there a push for that right now? Is that why this was the time to make this decision?
The list that I have seen is about 10 to 12 of people that are very serious about opening a data center and moving a data center into West Virginia. I think there's one that's very close in Mason County that we've heard about that is 3 gig, which would be 3,000 megawatts. And so that requires a microgrid. And I think what we have to understand, and I'll talk specifically about Berkeley County. So, you know, there's a pushback, and again, some of the pushback came from me. The data center that's very likely to come here, which is about 110 to 125 megawatts. They can plug into the grid and not need a microgrid. And so that was the concern, is that 25% of the revenue that would have been due to Berkeley County is now going to go to the state under the current bill. But if you look at the other data center that is looking to come to Berkeley County, is about 800 megawatts. And the grid can't handle that. And so in order for, in my opinion, and from everything that I've heard, the grid can't handle that in Berkeley County. So what has to happen is that data center has to have its own microgrid. Well, but without this bill, they can't do that. So I didn't see a way in which this 800 megawatt data center could come here without the expansion of microgrids, which was a big part of House Bill 2014. So, you know, again, you can't collect money on what you don't have, and you can't have a large data center here or in a lot of areas of the state, including the one coming to Mason County, without a microgrid.
Better to get a little of something than a lot of nothing.
Well, what's the saying? 70% of a watermelon is better than 100% of a grape. I mean, that's essentially kind of what this is. So.
Jason, when you were on last time, you made a argument that that Berkeley County and the other counties should be satisfied with the percentage they got. And I'm not getting into the excess levy and all that you were talking about. But the fact that Berkeley County was already moving forward on their data center, when this bill passed. That's different than these counties that had not been moving forward. They're getting something for nothing. Berkeley County had invested quite a bit of time and effort. And how do you argue that they're not been penalized at this point in time?
I don't know that satisfied is the word that I used. And I think that point is well taken. And that's why, we fought so hard to make sure the county was able to get the 75% of what they would have normally gotten without it, without this bill. And because as the bill came out of the House, as the House passed this bill, the county would have only gotten the amount of the base, which would have been what the revenue, the property tax revenue before the development. That's how the bill came out of the House. And so when it came to the Senate, we changed it so that they would get, subject to the formula, the 30%, but that 30% does not factor in the schools. So the state still gets all the county still gets all the state aid. So that's what makes it 75% to the county. But again, you get 75% of 125 megawatts, and you're going to get 75% of 800 megawatts. That's better than getting 100% of 125 megawatts and 0 of 800 megawatts. Now, that's the point.
The 75% is after you factor what you would have lost in school aid formula funding. This is the net you're talking about.
That's right. Yeah, so it is net of 75%. That's exactly right.
Now, in regards to the overriding of local ordinances or for those counties which have zoning, there was a reason for this, why all 55 needed to be handled by the state and treated equal. Explain that.
Well, I think that's, the governor has said that he wants West Virginia to be at the top of the list when data center companies are looking to locate somewhere. And he felt very strongly and feels very strongly that you're able to do that when you have one set of rules statewide as opposed to 55 sets of rules. And so I want people to understand, I know I said this last week, but this is not about having no rules for data centers. It's about having one set of rules for data centers so that, when companies look to come here and they may want to put data centers in multiple counties, they want to know that they're going to work with commerce and economic development to be able to do that. There will be that liaison from the Department of Commerce who will work with the individual counties to make sure that their concerns and needs are being met. And I don't envision a scenario where Commerce is just going to come in and just run roughshod over these counties, because that is not in their best interest, not in the best interest of the state to do that. And so certainly the legislators in that area would have a lot of pushback, and that wouldn't, that wouldn't help the relationship between the executive branch and the legislature or through Commerce to do that. So, I'm confident through the rulemaking process that will take place over the next several months that there will be rules put in place to be able to protect some counties.
Matt?
Are data centers kind of big on bringing employment, or is that more financial? They'll probably bring fewer employees.
Yeah, it's not a lot of there are not a lot of employees associated with a data center, but there is a tremendous amount of property tax, both from real property and from the personal property of the technology equipment that's inside the data center.
And a lot of construction employees.
Yeah. So there's obviously the construction element of it, sure.
Yeah.
Now, will taxes in lieu of tax? What's my word?
Pilot.
Will pilot play a role here?
No.
So the data centers will own all their equipment, and it will not be equipment bought by the state and loaned to the.
I can't envision any scenario where a data center would receive a pilot. That would be a very poor policy to do that.
About a minute left, Jason. What did you do for roads?
Well, in the general revenue surplus section of the budget, that is the surplus section is what we refer to commonly as the back of the budget. When there is surplus, then those items that we list in the back of the budget are funded. And so, in what the legislature put as the number one item that would get funded first would be $125 million for roads. The governor reduced that in his line item veto to 100. Now, we have what we said at the beginning of the show. We have $100 million already in surplus for this fiscal year. We will have far more than that as we get through the next few months. So the first $100 million of that surplus will go to roads.
All right, very good. Final minute after we do our last 2-minute time out of the program, and then we'll wrap it up here.
Hi, Crescia Hornby here. Larry DeMarco, broker of modern